Howdy, fellow freedom lover. I'm just a humble 46-year-old family man and senator, here to remind you that the elections are coming up. Follow me as I buy some bread from your local bakery, and I give this homeless man who happened to be here $3.50. You're witnessing trickle-down economics live at work. I can afford this because of the many generous donations to my political party. I used to be dirt poor like you, but now I'm a multi-millionaire thanks to democracy, the single greatest thing on the planet. You can probably hear my charming southern drawl. It's completely natural, because I grew up on a farm in New York. That's as southern as it gets. I'm just a country boy looking to get big in this brave new world. And you can help me by choosing which party you would like to run the entire the entire country. Elections are popping up all over the world in the year of our Lord 2024. Don't forget to vote, because your vote can make the difference which 80-year-old white man rules the country. Yes, you get to decide which senile felon will make all of the decisions that impact your very means to survive for the next 4 years. Will it be the constantly farting dementia suspect who was directly involved in bombing Yugoslavia and thus being partially responsible for the Balkan Wars? Or will it be the man who is currently under suspicion for treason, a felon, a known scammer who made a phony university named after him, and a hater of women and people of color? These two fine gentlemen are the best possible candidates for the election. We only need two choices because it's already so hard to decide between their greatness. If you have trouble deciding between the two only options, you should try voting for the one who is for freedom, for liberty, for democracy, good old-fashioned family values, for the people, for unity, and for literally everything that's good in this world. Last elections, the candidates were already so popular that it was almost a completely even 50-50 split. So much passion for politics. The elections unite us like nothing ever before. Isn't democracy the best thing in the world? You get to decide if the government should raise the military budget by 5% or by 7%. You get to decide which taxes should be raised. You get to decide how much we should cut the budget for public schools. You have freedom! Now go back to your awesome 9-to-5 job and enjoy some Netflix. You have an infinite selection of what media you can consume, and so many brands to choose from. Aren't the fruits of democracy beautiful? So, remember, liberty lovers and freedom fanatics, you must vote for the good of the world, for the good of your country, and most importantly, for the good of our people. So go ahead, line up behind those beautiful voting machines and stand in line to become a part of history. Who knows, maybe your vote will be the one to change everything. Freedom! That was something. I'm glad that creepy senator is gone, because boy do I hate the elections, especially in recent times. I feel like they have become more of a spectacle than a serious debate about which person or group of people are the best to run the country. I actually try to not be too political on my channel, since politics are poison for the mind, and because I am a comedic channel, after all. Or at least YouTube thinks so, don't judge me. But I feel like it's appropriate for me to talk about the elections, because they've become an absolute joke. And we have to address the big elephant and donkey in the room, the United States. They have some of the biggest, craziest elections out there. Truly, they're one big circus now, with politicians like Trump bringing rappers on stage to perform various songs, or Biden making memes about Dark Brandon and unironically saying that you ain't black if you don't vote for Biden. The US elections have become one big hilarious spectacle that the entire world is watching, and while it's very funny to watch two old men roasting each other, they are also responsible for major decisions that could potentially cause the end of humanity. Millions of lives are at stake while they're trying to figure out how to raise taxes without people complaining too much. It's also topical since the EU elections are also happening, and they've been quite divisive, especially in countries like Germany. It's not just America that is plagued by a lackluster leader and a bad selection of governing bodies, because Olaf Scholz, current Bundeskanzler of Germany, is mostly known for indirectly raising the Döner prices to €8, and that pretty much sums up his entire time as the Bundeskanzler. I think pretty much all of the German political parties are heavily disliked in one way or another. So a lot of people are definitely going through the election hate right now, but why have the elections and candidates become so hated, and could this be due to the flaws in democracy? Does your vote really impact the selection process, or is it just the illusion of choice? What are the flaws of the American two-party system? We'll discuss all of the topics in this video, starting now. Let's discuss the illusion of choice. In a democracy, hypothetically the people get to decide who their new leader is and what party should win. But what if there are only two political parties to choose from? Well, you choose the one you like most. But what if both of them are terrible? How did this happen? The two-party system in the US is responsible for many major issues in the country, and even in the world, because seeing the country with the second highest amount of nukes throwing temper tantrums is unsettling to say the least. I think a two-party system can't even be called a true democracy, because if both of them agree on most things, you can't do anything to stop them, and picking your poison is not the same as picking your governing body, or at least it shouldn't be. The rivalry between the Democrats and Republicans is literally like the rivalry between Blue Team and Red Team in Team Fortress 2. The characters are the same on both teams, they're just wearing different colors. Because of the two-party system, the US has become incredibly right-shifted to the point where a centrist in Europe would be considered a borderline radical leftist in the US. Both of the parties don't want free healthcare, they both want to keep the guns, they share the same sentiment when it comes to supporting countries that are at war, and of course, both of them support the military-industrial complex. I think that functionally they're actually the same party, with the only difference being their level of conservatism and liberalism. So does your vote even matter if you want free healthcare, but the only two parties are against it? Or when both of them present the most hated presidents in recent history and tell you with a straight face to choose between the two. Ah yes, am I going to vote for a small loan of $1 billion? Or Joe Biden's husband? There are over 330 million people in the United States, and no one is more qualified or liked than these two. Mind you, the only reason Joe Biden won the 2020 elections was because he wasn't Trump. You heard me right, the current leader of the US wasn't chosen because of his great abilities as a leader, but simply because people hated him slightly less than they did Donald Trump. This should not be the case, ever. I thought we got rid of monarchy so we wouldn't get an 84-year-old Duke of Edinburgh on the throne, but it ended up happening nonetheless. The leader of a country should be chosen because they're the best one, not because they're the lesser evil. The whole elections just constantly feel like voting for the lesser evil over and over again until we reach unprecedented levels of evil that can't be dealt with. This is no fault of the American people, by the way. I actually stand with them. Most Americans either dislike or hate both of this year's presidential candidates, but they're in what's known as the silent majority. The people you see storming the Capitol or marching on the streets are in the minority, but they're very loud, so that's what you see on the news. But the silent majority actually gets to decide who runs the country, and they are not happy about this year's elections. But what will happen now that the silent majority is against both of the parties? We'll have to wait and see. But it's not their fault they're in this predicament. You see, a two-party system almost always results in an oligarchy or even the dictatorship of some kind, and they use tricks to convince the public that they are in control and they get to choose who leads them, but in reality, they don't. In countries that don't have the two-party system, people are encouraged to vote for parties they truly like and agree with, and even if they get as low as 5% of the votes, they will get representatives in parliament that get to make decisions. Sometimes, two or more parties might merge into one party to gain more political power and a higher percentage of votes. If the only two parties decided to merge into one without explicitly saying it, then you've just created a dictatorship or an oligarchy, where the same old people get to decide how to run the country. This is why the US has the two terrible presidents debacle, the housing and rent increases, and grocery prices growing. Of course, nobody voted for any of this, but they don't have to, because the Democrats and Republicans will do it for them. Why wouldn't the Democrats and Republicans collaborate? They have such a chokehold on US voters that a partnership would result in complete control over the entire country. If there are only two parties that have an almost identical stance on everything, then your vote doesn't matter, because both of them can do whatever they want, and because there are no alternatives, they will end up winning anyway, so they don't have to listen to the voters whatsoever. It's like, do you want to eat red waffles or blue waffles? You'll end up eating waffles regardless of what you choose. Sure, the Democrats and Republicans might have differences when it comes to gender or pronouns, but these things aren't that important. The actual important things, like sending money to the Middle East to a certain country, both of them fully agree on, and you can't vote against it as a US citizen. They actually use things like the gender debate and pronouns to distract you, and to make it seem like they're two very different parties, but their core values are essentially the same. The American democracy in itself is also very shaky because they don't have a direct democracy. In a direct democracy, the people would be able to vote on specific issues and decisions, and based on the outcome of the votes, the decision would be followed through. Switzerland has this democratic system, for example, and they're not doing all too bad, although they have their own problems. The biggest problem with the direct democracy is that it's unbearably slow, the votes being counted each time, and the voting process itself can take weeks or even months just for a decision to be made. And let's just say that not all people are the sharpest tools in the shed, so letting the people rule through a direct democracy wouldn't be much of a solution. Heck, the president is supposed to represent the people and make these decisions quicker than them, but that might not be the case anymore. I actually propose a form of direct democracy where public votes are held for all decisions that directly involve the citizens somehow. For example, the government wants to pass a new law that would allow the NSA to complete and all access to any citizen's private information at all times. There would be a vote among the people, and if they say no, the NSA can crawl back to the hellscape they came from. I'm personally incredibly frustrated that most democracies are not direct in any capacity, because I have to pay a ridiculous amount in taxes just so my country gets to fund foreign conflicts with that money. I'm anti-war, and I know plenty of people who are systematically anti-war as well, so why am I forced to indirectly support the government's stupid military-industrial complex? I imagine many people want to have a say in what their hard-earned taxpayer money is being spent on, and they hate when they can't do anything about it because somehow every single available political party supports wars and weapons manufacturing. I'm sick of old men deciding how I live. But seriously, why are all of the candidates so old? This is a pretty global phenomena, but it's currently extremely apparent in America once again, with the top 2 candidates being well over 75 years old. Some countries require people over 65 to retake their driver's license, or they can't drive altogether, but apparently 75-year-old men are perfectly fit to run the country. It's also not just the presidents that are old enough to remember the Beatles performing live, all of the senators and other officials are extremely old as well. Like for example Nancy Pelosi, who was born in 1940. Was actively part of the Democratic Party up until 2023. I've talked to plenty of 80-year-olds in my lifetime, and some of them still think East Germany is a thing or Yugoslavia, or that you can get a full meal for $5. They're very nice. I just don't think they're fit to make future decisions about a whole country when they aren't really sure what the internet is. It's also so frustrating as a young person seeing these incredibly old, borderline senile people make careless decisions about the future and global warming while I just have to sit there and watch. A lot of them don't care about how their decisions will affect the next decade because they're probably not going to be alive by then. This is known as a gerontocracy, where mostly old people have control over the government, and I don't think this should be the case. Sure, they have a ton of experience, but we also need people who are adaptable to new ever-changing environments, and people over 70 simply can't do that anymore. The minimum age for becoming president is 35 years old, but if there's a minimum age, why is there no maximum age? I think a maximum age for presidency should be a basic requirement, because it has been shown time and time again that senior citizens are not fit to run the entire country. Literally. Joe Biden keeps pooping his pants on stage and just wandering off. He'll also occasionally start speaking incoherent gibberish and then laughing randomly. It was funny at first, but now I'm seriously concerned for the man's health, and I think he needs help instead of running the United States of America. It's actually so insanely surreal to me that this is the leader of one of the biggest countries in the world, and he'll just say things like, America is a nation that can be defined by a single word. This would have never happened if we had a maximum age you can be president. Also, I think we should maybe lower the minimum age requirement for presidency. 35 is pretty high. I think 32 or even 34 would be more reasonable. You can't tell me that a 30-year-old president would be worse than what is currently going on in the world. The maximum age limit should generally apply to all politicians. If you're making major decisions about the future on a whim, you'll at least have to be alive to see them happen. The maximum age would also prevent older leaders from doing Hail Marys because they have nothing else to lose. This is not strictly a US thing, by the way. I won't say any names in particular, but there are many more very old leaders out there who should probably step down before waging wars on each other. There are measures to test the president's cognitive abilities, but they're also a joke. The cognitive abilities test that Trump was ordered to do was ridiculously easy. Identify these animals and you're fit to run the entire country. Why are the presidents so old that they need to be tested for being functional in the first place? It is also not normal for a leader to unironically be under suspicion for dementia. And it makes a lot of people very nervous when they think about what a senile old man could do with a big red button on his desk. What if he forgets what that button was for and he presses it out of curiosity and whoops, the earth is gone. Sorry! Ideally, the leaders of a country should be the best of the best with a solid background and a lot of knowledge. So why did America choose actors and TV personalities like Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump to be president? I'm not saying an actor can't be a great leader. I'm just saying that they might not be good when it comes to logistics and legislature, which is very important if you are the president. These ex-TV personalities usually have a lot of charisma and they're trained how to act in front of cameras and be likable, so no wonder they won the elections. People are very emotional, and politicians know this and they use people's emotions to their advantage. Sadly, tough decisions that are good for the country require logic and reasoning, and people don't want to hear how you could potentially increase the GDP by 0.1% every 2 months. They want to hear that they'll be rich, they'll get jobs guaranteed, they'll get affordable groceries, they'll get everything they want as long as they vote for reliable excavation demolition. And then they'll have a catchy slogan like "I like Ike" and you've practically won already. My issue with this is, I can't eat catchy slogans for breakfast, no matter how hard I keep trying. I want to see results, but a politician doesn't actually have to keep the promises they make. That's right, politicians will just unironically lie to the public to get elected, collect a bunch of money for pushing laws that benefit megacorporations, fulfill zero goals of their campaign, and leave. This is so prevalent, politicians are known as professional liars now, and functionally, that's what they are. There's just so many of them. Or maybe they don't fully lie, but over-exaggerate their claims, but you still feel like you've been fooled because they promised they'd make everything better, but everything's the same more or less. Not only do they lie and twist the truth all the time, they also try to be as broadly appealing as possible, so they usually won't discuss controversial topics even if they're important, or they give non-answers that can be interpreted any which way. How are we, the voters, supposed to choose the best candidate if they won't reveal their stances on important but controversial issues? They only reveal their true selves once they've been elected. What is this, a dating show? We have to know what they're like ideally before they're elected, so the voters can make a more informed decision, and I'm sure everyone is incredibly tired of hearing the same talking points over and over again. Like, I will give the people what they want. I'll keep the country safe. I'll make it great again. I'll make it better again. I will make the American dream come true. This all boils down to nothing. I think a politician should be held accountable for their claims. Their campaign goals shouldn't be empty idealized promises. They should be actual tangible goals that have consequences if they're not reached. For example, if you promise to fill all of the potholes in your city and your campaign has resulted in 0 potholes being removed, they must pay back the money they got for their reign or go to prison. If there's no accountability for empty promises, then politicians will keep making them, people will keep falling for them, and we keep a bunch of crooks in parliament instead of people who want what's best for their region. I know that they are held accountable in theory, but in practice, they usually get away with it, because to be perfectly clear, the many problems of the elections come from corruption. Corrupt politicians trying to get rich quick or be on some sick power trip. Also, powerful positions tend to attract a lot of sociopaths, because they are willing to do anything to get those positions, with no remorse or morals, as long as it benefits them. So having positions of power that attract people who want money and power at the cost of everything else is a nightmare. There are many sociopaths in politics, and this just makes it that much harder to vote for an honest person who wants to improve things. The thing is, usually good-hearted people are too busy helping other people in need to enter the world of politics, and they don't care much about the money and power you can get from them. So because of the nature of the position we have created, we are attracting more selfish sociopaths than good-hearted altruists. Generally, when there's money involved, some people are willing to do anything to get it. So hear me out, they don't even need to be sociopaths or psychos necessarily. So what if we remove the financial incentives for being a politician? It's a hard job if you're doing it honestly though, and I do think they deserve appropriate compensation for that. But no mega millions or enough money to buy entire islands where nobody knows what's going on. Huh, an island with a bunch of famous people and political people doing dubious things in it. Where have I heard that one before? Smaller financial incentive, less people lining up to fill their pockets instead of being civil servants. There are also many ways influential people in politics can bribe politicians to get better laws for their company, future bailouts, etc. Simply giving money to your favorite political partners is illegal of course, but you could gift them a Rolex instead. Expensive gifts kind of nullify the no bribe rule, since it's not exactly hard to put 2 and 2 together to sell the kilograms of gold Lockheed Martin just gifted you and lobby for more conflicts in the Middle East. But that's an easy fix. No more gifts that are greater than $5,000 or something. But this actually still won't fix the bribery issue, because politicians can be bribed by corporations and companies through insider trading. No physical evidence has to be involved in this process. A company could hypothetically promise to tell a politician when their stock prices are gonna rise up due to events within the company. Now the bribed person can use this information to buy stock of said company before the big increase in price. Sell it at the top dollar and voila, you have potentially made millions of coins through insider information. Now you just have to surreptitiously propose new laws and bills in favor of that company. A lot of the investments of politicians are actually public, and pro tip, some of them have a very good investment record, so if you follow their portfolio, you yourself could potentially profit from this. But how do we stop this evil form of bribery? I think potential presidential candidates and state officials should be banned from participating in the free market and trading as long as they're in office. Because the simple knowledge of stocks could directly impact their decision making when it comes to changing and making laws. A very obvious example would be the practice of fracking. I've seen this exact thing in a BoJack Horseman episode where Mr. Peanut Butter is for fracking because of the money he gets from those oil giants. It's not so different in real life, whether you like it or not. Huge businesses, companies, and corporations have an immense influence on politics. This can be described as corporatism, and the US has suffered the most from it. Although a lot of countries are very guilty when it comes to this. Is it truly still a democracy if giant businesses who nobody voted for get to decide how the country is run because of their large amounts of power and money? It should be in the hands of the people instead of entities like BlackRock. They're all looking to make a profit even if it comes at our expense. The whole point of a democracy is that people get to vote for things they want, and hypothetically, an elected politician's job should be to represent the people and make the best possible decisions for them. But how could they ever do that if they only listen to these mega corporations? We just end up feeling powerless when laws are passed that enable businesses to pollute the environment even more, or when they buy up massive amounts of real estate, then rent it to us, and then when there's nowhere else to go, they jack up the rent prices to borderline unaffordable levels. So once again, does our vote even matter? Politicians and ads on TV always say that every vote counts, and matters oh so much, but is this true? While a lot of elections come down to the wire, where 500 people can be the difference between a loss or a win, if you're in a country that has been practicing gerrymandering, you're screwed. Essentially, gerrymandering is the act of dividing different districts in such a way that it benefits your political party. Because not every single vote is counted individually, silly. No. Instead, each district is running an election if they should become blue or red. So if the Reds win by 1% in that district, the voting value is still counted as 1 point for the Reds. And can you see how a political party could hypothetically swindle a win just by changing what the districts are? One method the gerrymanderers use will try to put all the people who are going to vote for a particular party into one district, so 80% of the voters are in that one area, and the other 20% are not enough to win the other districts. So even if a state has more people who are voting for the blue party, the red party can win because they add more districts, therefore more voting points and influence. This is known as packing. So much for your vote mattering, huh? If you're in a district where most people are already going to vote for the Reds or the Blues, then your vote actually ends up not mattering all that much. There is also cracking, where you can spread all of the opposing voters thin across all districts, reducing their voting power and influence even further. Now, this doesn't sound fair at all, does it? Your vote can essentially be made useless by corrupt politicians drawing salamander-like districts looking for an easy win once again, and this goes against the spirit of democracy. And I think many people have realized that some countries do indeed only have the illusion of choice. A multiple party system makes things like gerrymandering much more difficult, but they can still collaborate with each other in dubious ways. For example, Germany wants to introduce the digital euro as the new main currency and abandon physical cash in the future. Okay, I hate this, so I want to vote for a party that is against this, but weirdly enough, almost all major parties are in support of it, except for the AfD, which wants to make physical currency part of the basic rights. But oopsie, the AfD has ties to the far right and it's generally known to be very hateful when it comes to the topic of immigrants. So now I'm faced with the choice of choosing a party that supports removing cash from the circulation, getting us ever so closer to that wonderful police state. Or I can choose a far-right party with dubious intentions and representatives and potentially recreate the political environment in the 1930s. So a multi-party system isn't a perfect solution, and it can still fall victim to corruption just as easily as a two-party system can, but I think it's definitely a start to a fairer democracy. The military in the US is also way too involved in democratic decision-making in my opinion. They're the executive force, they shouldn't be making legislations or lobbying for potential conflicts. Or the Pentagon will occasionally just spend billions of dollars on firewood, or make $1 trillion disappear into thin air, like some government experiment version of Houdini. This happens to a lot of the taxpayers' hard-earned money. It just seems to disappear into unknown projects, and it's a Kafkaesque nightmare trying to figure out where exactly your money is going towards. It should be far more transparent. They call a lot of the shots behind the scenes. Even if they're supposed to follow orders, they have essentially become its own independent branch of government, and nobody knows what's going on there because everything is top secret. So secret in fact that even the President of the United States can't access all of the documents. That begs the question, who has that type of clearance? And who are they? This is also why Trump is promising to fight the deep state, but I think that behind all of the curtains and mysteries, it's the same bureaucrats and politicians, just way more secretive. So all of the same issues apply to them, and I think they need to be checked and restricted all the same, because unchecked power also inevitably leads to corruption. I think the reason the higher-ups can end up being corrupt so frequently is because in a lot of democratic countries, it's still a hierarchy, and tyrants will always use hierarchies to oppress the people at the bottom as much as possible for their personal gain, because they know the people won't resist. I believe our system with leadership shouldn't be a hierarchy, but instead a sort of rock-paper-scissors formation, where the people kick out the politicians if they get too corrupt, the politicians keep the military in check, and the military keep the people in check so there's no anarchy. In theory, this should be the case because of the three powers, legislative, judicial, and executive, but in practice, it's just the executive bodying anything else, and people have become very compliant in my opinion, to a fault. The people need to be a part of the power balance and power structures instead of being the pedestals to the military and the upper branches of government. The legislative powers, the senators, and presidents are meant to be civil servants. They must serve us, not the other way around. So when they start to get too cocky with their corruption and disregard for our happiness, we have to revolt. Isn't one of the biggest reasons the US allows its citizens to own their guns constitutionally is so the citizens can overthrow the government if it gets too corrupt? I don't know about you, but statistically, the wealth disparity between the 1% and the rest is greater than during the French Revolution. People can barely afford the cost of living, and they're forced to watch Dumb and Dumber run the country into the ground. Apparently, that's not enough for a revolution though. But what is? How much more BS are the American people willing to take before they snap? Has the internet really made them completely docile and obedient? Think about it. Most people are afraid of starting a revolution because the military is so much more powerful than ever before, but most of the military is made of ordinary people as well, and they would absolutely refuse to shoot their own countrymen. It's literally the last thing they want to do. They serve to protect, not to attack. I think once enough people realize that together they have a genuine chance of overthrowing their current corrupt government, it's Jover for the crooks. But even without a revolution, surely if people start mass protesting by not paying their taxes anymore, the American government will have to respond. So in summary, this is how I would improve the current American democratic system. Implement a maximum age limit for presidency. Integrate the people to be a part of the power balance instead of being walked all over. Significantly lessen the financial incentives for being a politician. Have antitrust laws but for politicians. Replace the two-party system with a more European one. Introduce direct democracy, when the government wants to make or change new laws that will directly impact the taxpayers in a major way. Make the spending of the taxpayer money more transparent. Hold politicians accountable for their promises. And remove corporatism and the military-industrial complex from the government as much as possible. Easier said than done as always, but the current system definitely has room for improvement. In conclusion, everyone hates the elections because they have no real choice in them. I know I'm just some guy on YouTube, and these suggestions might not be perfect, but I think they're a good start for a discussion about how some democratic governments can be improved upon. Let me know in the comments below what you think could help the elections feel like our vote actually matters. Also, please be cool in the comments. I know this is a hot button issue, but if we never talk about it, it'll just get worse and worse. Apologies for any inconsistencies about the US. I don't live there, and most of the information online is heavily biased in one way or another. I have a Discord server linked in the description below. Like and subscribe, watch more of my videos, and bye bye!